9.5, the integumentary system. The integumentary system consists of the skin. The skin is the largest organ in the body. The function of the integumentary system, obviously protection. Mechanical protection is the most obvious, but also biological protection. This is our first line of defense against infection. If we can keep pathogens out of the body, this is the first line of defense, and also protection against water loss or desiccation. A lot of sensory input. The integumentary system contains a large number of different sensory receptors for touch, for temperature, for vibration, for pain. So much of our sensory input is initiated in the integumentary system. It's also very important in temperature regulation. In the next unit, we'll look at temperature regulation as an example of homeostasis and see how the skin is involved in temperature regulation. Also, vitamin D synthesis. The skin can produce vitamin D in the presence of UV sunlight. So a little bit of UV sunlight is a good thing. We can produce vitamin D. However, too much UV radiation is damaging, can burn the skin, and of course lead to skin cancers. Here's a diagram of the skin. The upper portion of the skin is the epidermis. Epi means over, so the epidermis. This is made of stratified squamous epithelial. We'll see a picture in just a moment where we can see greater detail of the epidermis. The next layer is the dermis. The dermis is made of dense fibrous connective tissue, and then there are a number of different structures that we'll identify in just a moment that are embedded in the dermis. And the lowest layer, the subcutaneous layer, is not actually part of the skin. It is included here in our diagram, but the subcutaneous is some loose fibrous connective tissue and some adipose, and this simply connects the skin to some of the underlying muscle tissues. Some structures inside the dermis. The sweat gland, coiled up here, produces sweat. You can see a duct that carries that sweat up to the surface of the skin. There is a hair. You have the shaft of the hair that extends down through the epidermis into the dermis, where the follicle of the hair is found. The root of the hair located in that follicle, that is where the growth occurs, and the growth extends the shaft out through the dermis and the epidermis. There's a little muscle that's attached to it. The erector pili muscle connects to that hair follicle. This is our fur fluffing muscle. Whenever you have goosebumps, that's due to contraction of that erector pili muscle. It pulls on the root of the hair, causes the hair to stand up. And so when fur-bearing mammals are cold and trying to warm themselves, they can fluff up the fur. This also occurs, of course, when you are nervous or scared. You might get goosebumps. And in this case, it's maybe our early warning system. It causes the hair to stand up, and then if something brushes close to your skin, that moves the hair, and there are some nerve endings that can detect something touching the hair. Number of touch receptors, and so several of them are shown here in this diagram. An oil gland or sebaceous gland. This produces oil or sebum, and that sebum is secreted out onto the hair shaft, and then it is carried up as the hair grows. That oil moves up through onto the skin. Here's a picture of the epidermis, so just that upper layer of stratified squamous epithelium, and so we can look at this in a little bit greater detail. We want to begin all the way down at the bottom. These are called the basal cells. Specifically, they are keratinocytes because they produce a protein called keratin, and that's what waterproofs the skin. But this is where very rapid mitosis occurs. These cells are constantly going through mitosis and dividing, and those daughter cells, as they are produced, get pushed to the surface. and as they migrate through the surface, they mature, they produce more and more of the keratin, which waterproofs the skin, that eventually will kill the cell, and so the upper layers of the epidermis are flat, dead cells that are stuck together up through the various layers. So we are constantly losing dead cells off of the top of the skin, constantly being sloughed off, and those are also constantly being replaced as mitosis pushes more cells towards the surface. Another cell that I'll mention, which is down in the basal layer, is a melanocyte. These are pigment-producing cells. They produce the pigment melanin, which is responsible for skin coloration and tanning. This melanin is our natural sunscreen, so it is produced in response to UV radiation in an attempt to keep UV radiation from damaging the DNA in these rapidly dividing basal cells.